Australian basketball history. Why don't we start with your name, where you're based, and how long you've been playing basketball?
Nigel Purchase is my name. Been involved in basketball for over 50 years now. Based in East Ivanhoe, but my work is in Albert Park and at MSAC, Melbourne Sports and Aquatic Centre. And I feel very privileged to be asked to come here along today, George, so I appreciate it and looking forward to our chat.
Well, it's our pleasure, Nigel. Okay to call you Nige today? One of
Yeah,
your nicknames?
please do, yes.
Fantastic. So we're keen to walk through your basketball journey and understand your early influences, obviously your professional career. We're keen to talk to you about Masters basketball, something that we're passionate about and something that the audience for this interview series is actively engaged with. But we actually want to start with what you're doing these days and fast forward the clock before we go back. So tell us about Chase basketball.
Well, I'm currently celebrating our 25th year of Chase basketball in 2025, so it's quite timely that we have this chat. But it goes back further than 25 years, actually, George. While we were playing for the Tigers and playing juniors and playing in Basketball Victoria, VBA back then, I always wanted to do more than simply play, and I think you needed to because the money wasn't sort of that massive that you could just play basketball. But started up coaching kids, and actually at my old primary school, Green Hills Primary School, which was my very first club, Green Hills Beavers as well. And started coaching kids in the mornings before school, and I loved it. And I loved it because I was on the court, but I loved it mostly because of the impact that it had on the kids. It got them out playing, a bit of exercise, and then occasionally you can help them with their shot or dribble or defence or gameplay, etc. And it really stuck with me. I was mid-20s back then, so you're talking way more than 25 years ago. I'm starting to feel old already, George. But I loved it. And it wasn't from there that I went on and started Chase, but I bounced around to some jobs here and there. But in some way, I just gravitated back towards coaching kids and the benefit of that for the kids. Even today, we run 8 academies at secondary schools, and I went around and visited 3 schools today, and the sessions are great, our coaches are great. And the kids are engaged, and it's just something I really, really love. So we've, like I said, we're celebrating 25 years of Chase basketball. We have 4 or 5 sort of categories that we're involved in. One is we have 8 academies at secondary schools. We do school holiday camps like everyone seems to these days. And we run skills programs, and we manage a few single court venues as well. And one of my mantras is I'm trying to get through life in a tracksuit. So I've been able to do that to this age, and pretty proud of myself. And I've had some jobs where I've had to wear suits and get dressed up, but I really feel comfortable with what we're doing and feel like we're having a positive impact on the several hundred kids and families that we work with.
I'm sure you are. Tell us about your skills development expertise and what you bring to players.
So a lot of it comes down to caring for the kids, and I think there's a saying that from the AIS, and I'll paraphrase this in that it's kids care more about. I'll say this as well as I possibly can. Kids or teams want to know how much you care about them before they care about how much you know. So, and that's kind of like, and I've been very clumsy there, by the way, but the essence of what we do is about caring for the kids. And myself and my coaches really care for the kids. And if you care for the kids as a base to your product, then everything else flows from that, from helping them to shoot and to do various other things. I think is about caring for the kids and helping them develop. And it's not always about the elite kids too, George. It's about kids who are just beginning, who may have played 2 or 3 years, who may not be getting the time or satisfaction out of the game that they really want. And we try and help them on their journey.
What are some of the other core values of Chase basketball and its team?
Well, we have an Indigenous term that is our byline, and I wish I could pronounce it, but it's Naganium Nagonium, and My friend Ricky Baldwin will be pretty unhappy with me for mispronouncing that. He runs the Koori Academy. But to translate that to English, it's to play is to belong. So we want the kids to feel like they belong. In 2025, a lot of kids have a lot of issues that they deal with from a day-to-day basis with mental health and social issues and peer group pressure and things of that nature. So ultimately that is what we're about, is helping kids to feel like they belong somewhere, and in the great sport of basketball, in the greatest state for basketball in the world, I think, Victoria, I think we play an okay role in that.
Your coaches embody these values. Tell us about your coaching team.
We have a wide variety of coaches, and part of my role within Chase Basketball these days is to vet the coaches. Historically, we used to try to get the biggest names, and quite often the big name players and profile players are great, but sometimes they couldn't be bothered with it, so their heart's not in it. So they may not care for the kids as much as we want them to care for the kids as running programs. We have an international coach, George, who shares your name, and he comes from Greece, and one of my favourite coaches. Everything he does, I completely, we're in step with. He cares for the kids first and foremost, but has a bit of discipline and the right mix of discipline and fun. We have Jay Lomar, who runs Auburn Academy, who is a die-hard basketball fan, and I don't really know anyone who loves basketball as much as Jay. And I saw him this morning and had a chat with him. And Courtney Gaze coaches at Elwood for us. We have about 30 coaches, so I'm going to miss some names out here that may offend them if they ever get to see this video. But there's a whole variety of coaches, from young kids who are sort of 18 to 19 through to people like myself who are very close to 60. And as Damien de Everidge would say, about to approach 60 from the wrong angle.
When you look forward, perhaps 5 years down the road, what's the vision for Chase Basketball? What's the business look like at that time?
Well, we need to develop. We're a volume business, and so we need quantity of participants, and the essence of being a volume business comes through the influence from Lindsay Gaze and the Gaze family, and Andrew and Janet Gaze Daniels, who's our general manager. In that we're always trying to represent the sport really well. And I think sometimes you can overcharge and under-deliver, but we're very much about offering a great service for a reasonable price, because we feel like we actually represent the sport. So it's a fine line between making a business viable and not undermining the essence of having to run a business with all the costs of a small business these days. And providing a really, really good service. So I think I don't want to say we've mastered the art of it, but I think we do a pretty good job of treading that fine line between commercial reality and doing the right thing by our clients.
What you do for your customers, of course, is a combination of skills development, but also personal development. What would you say to the kids and the parents who are out there thinking about enrolling in some form of program that builds these values in and some of these disciplines?
Well, I think the most important thing is to have fun, and I think there is so many ways that parents and other kids can take the fun out of it. I've had personal experience where I probably haven't been the best dad as well, and you get so caught up in the emotion of it, and at times you feel like your son or daughter is not being dealt with appropriately. Like all of us, George, our kids are probably our most precious things. So when so you become protective of them. But I think if you surround your son or daughter with good people and make sure that the fun is at the very top of the agenda, then that is a great thing. And then the next thing I would say, just be patient. What I found with the kids that we coach is that there's quite a few kids where you can tell them once and they'll pick it up and they'll do it, and that's fantastic for them. But the vast majority of kids need repetition, and you need to tell them 2 or 3, 5, 100 times before sometimes they get the instruction. So just be patient with them. And then the third thing would be perseverance. There's quite a few stories, and Stephen Hoare is one and Dejan Vasiljevic, who is now a star in the NBL and in the Boomers. But Stephen Hoare's a really good example of when he came through the juniors, he didn't make state teams, he didn't make the first team, and he persevered and captained the Melbourne Tigers in the NBL to 2 championships. And I think Dejan was like that as well, where he wasn't always in the first team or second team, he was down the ranks, but he persevered. And so that perseverance, patience and fun are probably 3 elements that I would push forward to any parents who are bringing kids through the ranks.
For those parents and kids that want to reach out, how do they get in contact with you, Nigel?
chasebasketball.com.au, and we'll do our best to fix you up. And we're mostly over towards MSAC. Our academies run from Sandringham through to Docklands and Auburn. And anyway, but get on the website and have a look, and we'd love to help you.
Awesome. Let's wind back the clock. The pinnacle of your career was 250 games, 10 seasons, Melbourne Tigers, Brisbane Bullets, but way before then there was an early influence. Tell us about your earliest basketball memory.
It's actually quite timely, George, that we talk about this, because in my involvement with the sport these days, I get asked to MC things and host events and things of that nature, and Pete's Bar, etc., has been doing for 14 or 15 years as the MC there. But this last year, I hosted the Green Hills Beavers 50th anniversary, and I was delighted to see that a guy called Graham Pollard was there. Now Graham he's had a business in sawdust, right, and sawdust delivery or whatever the business is. That's my memory of him, and it was great to see him and his wife there. And I got to actually thank him for getting me on the path to basketball, and told him about what I do now. And it was just such a really good moment for me. And he used to coach over it. I'll never forget this. He went to a seminar put on by Basketball Victoria, and he brought what he'd learnt there back to a training session for us. And it was putting the ball between your legs on a crossover or something. Now it's pretty simple, but I never forgot it. And that information has stayed with me. And I think quite often when you're a young kid, you're very impressionable and you look up to the coaches. But he played a very significant role in my life. He may not have known it at the time, but yeah. And I think coaches generally in any sport, whether it's basketball or soccer or whatever, have this immense responsibility with what they do, because they can affect the way a child thinks about themselves in either a positive or a negative way. And I think in 2025, in this era, that coaches really have a very significant role in the development of youth. And and Graham Pollard was my earliest memory, yeah.
So from that introduction to basketball by Graham Pollard, did you enter a school team or play in school, or did you join a suburban basketball club? What was the next phase?
So from there, I was playing for the Green Hills Beavers over at the Diamond Valley Stadium. It was just a 2-court venue, I think, back then, and they had Space Invaders there, and we'd go over and play Space Invaders and play a game or two. It was the days when you could play up an age bracket as well. So you might be under 14s, but you could play in 16s or 18s as well. And I remember being at Green Hills Primary School, and we'd play all the traditional sports of cricket and football and down ball and all that sort of thing. But there were a few blokes who are still involved in basketball now, Scott Del Zoppo, Cameron Groppy, and we would get there in the mornings on the asphalt court, and we'd play for a half hour, 45 minutes before school started. And you'd go into class in a lather of sweat, and I think that's what most young kids do these days. But they're still friends today because of sport. From there, I went to made rep teams, like the traditional route for kids these days. Moved over to Eltham, and then was there for a few years. And then I had a knee issue when I was 15, and had to sit out for a while. And when I came back, I was speaking to a guy called Ian Marshner, who I haven't seen for 40 years. And Ian had moved to the Melbourne Tigers. And when I was coming back from my knee injury, he suggested that, go and have a try at the Melbourne Tigers, which was a bit of a big thing, because it was I lived in Greensborough, and these days from Greensborough into Albert Park is not such a big thing because everyone does it every day. But back then it was like going from Albury to the city to a degree. So I took his advice, and his advice really formed my life. In all honesty, it was a sliding doors moment where I enrolled with the Melbourne Tigers, and then the very first time I played for the Tigers, I was told to go to the canteen at the old Albert Park Stadium, and then pick up your uniform. And this lady came out and gave me this uniform. It was like cardboard because the Gaze family used to make their own uniforms and put the numbers on, etc. And then I had to take a player. Dad and I had to take a player down to Chelsea for our first under-16 game. And he was a tall, skinny guy, and it was Andrew Gaze. And I'll never forget sitting in the car and us driving down to Chelsea. And even at that age, Andrew, adored his dad and spoke about his dad for the whole time. Now, I hadn't known of Andrew. I just knew him as a competitor, but I had no idea of the legacy and the orbit I was about to get into by being involved with the Gazers. And it's been fantastic for me and has really formed, me as a man as well. So that's how I got to where I got to be.
The timeline for this is around 1982 when you're in that Melbourne Tigers basketball program. But in 1983, the following year, you make your NBL debut, and at 17 years of age, you score 10 points in your first game. Take us back.
Yeah, well, that transition, the Melbourne Tigers club is really quite a special club, and a lot of people don't get it. I think that they don't tell people about their policies and about the way they go about it, or the Gazers don't, I should say. And that emanates from a humility that's been handed down from Ken Watson, I would think, as well. But you kind of got to figure things out for yourself. So I was involved in an under-16 team that went all the way through. We went bottom age, top age, into the under-20s. And I might be wrong, but I don't think we lost a game. We had a very, very solid team, and Ray Gordon was in that, and Michael DiMartino, Grant Salagari, Stephen Wallace, myself, and I'm going to miss out some names here, but it was a really, really solid team. And so what would happen on a Friday night is I'd go from school at Montmorency High, and then I'd go into the old Albert Park Stadium, and I'd be playing with Andrew would play every Friday night with the Americans, and I'm a firm believer that was really a big part of his development as a player. And I'd play every so often, but not as often as Andrew. Then we play our our rep game on the Friday night. I'd stay at the Gazers over the weekend because getting back to Greensborough was a bit of a task. And then we would, Andrew and I would train with the seniors, and the seniors at that time had Russ Dyer, Hugh Hobus, Peter Walsh, Brian Gorgian, Alan Westover, and a whole bunch of us young kids coming through. So it's almost like this apprenticeship that you get involved in, and if you persevere, getting back to those words we talked about before, if you persevere and have patience and have fun, I guess, to a degree, but work hard, then things kind of happen for you at Melbourne. And so we ended up graduating into the senior team, that first game, I'll never forget that first game because I went to Montmorency High, and it was very much a football club or football school, and it was all about, I think they were in the Collingwood region for drafting, and they talked about football, and basketball was like a second or third tier sport at this point. And I'll never forget being invited to go down and play 2 games in Tasmania for the Melbourne Tigers I'm not sure if it was Siebel or the NBL. Anyway, you might have to, my memory's a bit vague at points. But I remember coming back to school on the Monday and telling people I went down to Tasmania for the weekend to play 2 games of basketball, and it was like a big thing because travel back then wasn't as easy as what it is these days. And I'll never forget feeling good about that and saying, oh, maybe basketball is my thing. And then we played in the NBL the first year. We lost quite a few of those players that I just mentioned with Gorgian and Al, but we played against the Brisbane Bullets at the old Albert Park Stadium, and it was magnificent. It was very much different to what the NBL is these days, where they're playing in massive stadiums. It was very, very much about like a community feel, and we'd have just our friends coming along, and my mum and Margaret Gaze would bake the cakes and we'd have a post game, and all the teams would go back. But it was a very healthy and wholesome environment to be involved with, and I just loved playing basketball, and playing for the Tigers is one of the highlights of my life.
1984, Tigers finished in 9th place, and in 85 and 86, Tigers climbed to 3rd place in both seasons. What was going on in the club such that its performance was improving and really getting up towards the top of the ladder?
Well, I wasn't privy to everything, but I think I'm a good observer, and so some sponsors got involved with the club, which means you could get some players, and we through the connections of Lindsay Gaze, once again, Peter Sheehan, Rob Jolly, who were involved in the government way back then. I might be in the time frame a little bit long, so just persevere with me. But they used their influence to get some sponsors, and the club became a bit more professional. And then at that point, once you've got a budget for players, you can obviously attract a high calibre of players.
We get to 1987 and you deliver the best numbers of your game, and I think the best numbers of your career, averaging 16.5 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, 6.5 assists and 1.8 steals. The Tigers finish with a record of 3-23, but still end up being 4th place at the end of the season. Do you have much of a memory about 1987 and your performance?
Well, my involvement with the Tigers is very much a sliding doors moment. I was lucky to get into a system which is called the Melbourne Shuffle, or first and thirds, whatever you want to refer it to as. So I kind of fit into that system. These days in the NBL, it's very much about individual performance and being able to break a player down and get to the hoop or shoot a 3 over them. But back then we ran a system that emanated through Ken Watson and Lindsay Gaze from Auburn University and Drake University in the States. And it's very much a ball movement system. And I found myself to be a very good passer. And Andrew was a very good receiver. And so he and I had a very good connection with me in the right position, him being brilliant at pretty much everything involved in the game, and being able to finish plays. So we were good. It was a great season for me with figures, but we didn't win a great deal of games or a great number of games. But it was also a lot of good fun as well. We had a ball, and travelling around the country with your mates and doing our best to play against some of these teams. And for me, we were always undermanned, but I never forget playing against the likes of James Crawford and Leroy Loggins and Shane Heal and Derek Rucker and all these players who were just brilliant players. And it was a bit funny, George, because we sort of come into town and we're just a bunch of young Australian guys doing our best, and you have these big budget teams that that kind of at times smashed us, but sometimes we held our own. And I'm a firm believer in those rough days. Really helped the likes of some of our star players to reach the heights that they did.
Well, I think Andrew Gaze had a record season, or a fantastic season in 1987 as well, averaging 44 points, one 60-point game and 5 games in which he shot over 50 points. If he was here, do you think he'd attribute some of your passing skills?
Well, knowing Andrew, he's very, very humble, and he's very much aware that the system. He used the Melbourne Tigers system better than anyone. But he's always been grateful to all his teammates, I think, and he always puts the team first, and never, it's very honourable the way he sort of manages himself. And even last night in the NBL Awards dinner, he talks about the whole thing's named after him, but he feels uncomfortable that he's being recognised in such a way. So it's funny because Andrew went to the absolute heights of where he went to, and I often say if I was Andrew, I wouldn't speak to people like me. But he's never made me feel like I'm sort of any inferior, and we have a strong bond through not just basketball now, and But he's a superstar, and once again, for me to play alongside of him, as I'm sure most of his teammates would say, it's just a real honour, and what he did was really quite amazing.
Take us inside the culture of Melbourne Tigers at that point in time. How was the club evolving? What was changing? What were some of the key themes that were coming through?
Well, so when you say the Melbourne Tigers club, it's not just the NBL. I think most people think of the senior teams, but it's very much a club, and there's juniors that play. How it evolved was it went from non-professional to, I guess, semi-professional to professional, but some of the things that evolved out of that was a women's team, and Ray Tomlinson, who started the Melbourne Tigers women's program, along with Sandra Tomlinson, I believe. They became involved in the Melbourne Tigers WNBL team. So there was, the picture was pretty much perfect for a while. But then, just pretty much like every other NBL team, they didn't manage the books real well. So the expenditure got ahead of the income, and like most clubs, sort of had a lot of issues to deal with. And then the brand changed hands, and then from to the Seamus McPeak days, and then to the Kestelman days, and now most people within the sport think that United are the Melbourne Tigers, version 2 of the NBL team. Some of us don't feel that way.
Nigel, 1991 is a very memorable year for you and for us. We just won't let you forget what happened back then. At the end of the third quarter in a game against Brisbane Bullets, you unleash a full court shot, and it goes in off the backboard, and it still stands as the longest shot in NBL history. We've never stopped celebrating it and watching it. Tell us about that day and that moment.
Well, as I get older, I embellish the story. I say it was the fourth quarter and it won the game for us, but that wasn't the case. But it was just, like I said before, George, I was actually a pretty good passer, and some of my passing would be full court, hoiks to Andrew or whoever else is underneath the basket on a transition. So it wasn't, I don't want to say it was a fluke, but it was pretty much a bit of a fluke. But time was winding down, and Stephen Whitehead threw the ball to me. I must have been maybe 2 or 3 metres inside the baseline, and banked it. And Brian Curl was coaching at the time, and he tried to wave it off. But it was an amazing moment. After the game, actually, Stephen Whitehead, who's a top bloke, and he was called rookie when he was coming through the ranks, said that, and quite rightly, that most people would forget about the result of the game, but I haven't forgotten about that shot. So he was quite true in that case.
Melbourne face Illawarra at the end of the season, and there's a historic game in which Melbourne scores 186 points against Illawarra 158 points. Andrew Gaze has 59 points of his own, and the Hawks shoot 76% of the field. Must have been an amazing game.
It was an amazing game, but they had a coach, I think it was David Lindstrom, I'm not sure, who was a bit eccentric, I would say, and his instructions to his team were, don't worry about defence, we're going to try and outshoot them. And I think they shot so many three-point attempts, but it was kind of a game that was out of the box because we could score it willy-nilly. I think we had 111 at half-time. But it was kind of like an unconventional game with unconventional strategy. So, but yeah, a good game nevertheless.
1992, Leonard Copeland and David Colbert joined the team. Tell us about the contribution they made.
Well, Leonard's one of my favourite people of all time. He's still involved in Australian basketball now and is a star in the media. But I'll never forget the time that he first came to Melbourne, and a lot of these Americans who arrive here don't really know Australia. I'm sure they know it better these days than 30 or 40 years ago. But when Leonard did come to town, Bruce Ward, who was the general manager of the Tigers, took him down to the carousel, and they had a few drinks and some wines. And Copes was thinking, "Oh, this is a good start to my experience here in Australia." And then after the lunch, Bruce said, "Oh, I'll come and pick you up for training later on." So there was practice 3 or 4 hours after the lunch. And I remember Dean Vickerman, who was playing for the Tigers at the time, he just wiped wiped Copes clean. He was all over and made Copes look like a bit of a fool. But that was just a one-off because Lar Copeland is a champion, and he and Andrew and their on-court and off-court partnership and friendship is stuff of legends now. And you might be too young to remember, but the old alley-oop played from Andrew to Lennard was kind of like, I'm trying to think of something that's parallel to that these days with a special play, but it's just was fantastic back then. And I think that plays like that and players like Lennard certainly are a big reason for the sport being so popular today.
Let me assure you, I'm not too young to remember. I'm older than you.
Oh, you're really okay.
1993, you make the move to Brisbane Bullets. So what were the circumstances that led up to that move?
Well, I was sliding down the bench, and that's the hardest thing about basketball is that you have 7 guys sitting on the bench and 5 on the court, and so I always liked to play. So there was an opportunity for me to go to Brisbane. It was the year after we'd been in the finals and lost. So from a strategic point of view, a lot of people would say it was a stupid move because the Tigers went on to win in '93. From my point of view, my wife and I got to go and live in Brisbane. We made some good friends up there. It was an experience. In a way, I feel a bit empty about it, but I also, in a way, I don't feel so bad about it because unless you're actually playing and contributing, personally, and everyone's different, I wouldn't really feel like I'd deserve the championship win anyway. But it was a bit sad. I remember watching that championship final and the series and everything, but very happy for the guys who won it. And a really good time up in Brisbane under Bruce Ward and playing with the likes of Shane Froling and Shane Heal and Leroy and Roger Smith and Luke Gribble and Andre Moore, and Dave Colbert was up there as well. And so, yeah, really, really good times.
And in that year, you come in at the same time that Brian Curl's moving on and Bruce Palmer takes up the coaching role. What was it like being coached by Bruce? Well,
I'd only ever heard of Bruce through friends who had played for him. And he's a genius with the X's and O's, one of the best strategic coaches to ever come to Australia. And he was fantastic all year. We were on top of the ladder for quite a bit of the year. Things fell away a bit at the end. So we probably didn't sort of live up to our full potential that year. But a great coach, a great human, and one of the funniest Americans to ever come down and be involved in our sport here as well.
Who else was on that squad with you?
With the Bullets, well, there was Leroy, who was one of the best players to ever come out here. Shane Heal, who was a champion. Andre Moore, he's just a powerful man, and still involved in basketball up in Queensland. Roger Smith, Luke Gribble, who are quite a few. I can't think of them all right now. You put me on the spot there, George. But a really good experience for me in a different environment because I've been a Tiger my whole life, and so experiencing a different culture and different ways about going or doing things was a real eye-opener for me.
You make it to the semi-finals that year and go down against the Sydney team with Dwayne McLean. Do you remember that game?
I do, and he was Dwayne McLean was like the biggest name in Australian basketball for a couple of years, I would say. He had this amazing athletic ability, but he seemed to just glide along the court. The way he ran was just, beautiful to watch. Had an unorthodox shot, but just could get it done under the most intense pressure. It was a bit sad for us because we had high aspirations in that year in maybe going to the grand final and potentially winning it. I think some of the chemistry with the team and sort of fell away. But once again, still a great experience for me.
250 games across 10 years with those two clubs. How do you think the NBL evolved over that decade?
I think there's been ups and downs with the NBL, and I think it's really exciting right now. I think what's going on right now is, with some great leadership and people who can afford to take some chances and risks and maybe increase the standards in what we're doing. It's a brilliant time right now. From back then, the sport was very much an amateur sport, I think anyway. Maybe because the Tigers really approached it as an amateur sport, and our payments were really just covering expenses to a degree. So the sport evolved, and in those days when there was the very first sellout of Rod Laver Arena. I remember a friend of mine, Mark Brecky, who was playing, and John Dorge. They had some words in the media, and it was a catalyst for everyone to say, "Oh, I want to go and watch these two giants, battle it out." And things like that were amazing. I don't want to say too much about Andrew, but I'm a good observer, George, and Andrew's influence on the game here is everyone just sees him as a commentator maybe these days, but he would, everywhere we went, we'd sell out. So we weren't the best team, but because Andrew was in the team, most teams would sell out or maybe get 80% attendance in the bigger stadiums. So his influence in helping other teams and attracting sponsors. I know the Hungry Jacks one, and this could be inaccurate, this is my interpretation of it. I know we, in Perth one time, we went to Hungry Jacks as a post-game and had a Whopper or whatever, and someone took a photo and it was in the paper and saying Andrew Gaze at Hungry Jacks. Now Jack Cowan owns Hungry Jacks these days, but I believe he saw that and it was kind of like the catalyst for Hungry Jacks getting involved in the NBL. I mean, Jack's got an American background, so maybe the being involved in basketball made sense to him, but things like that people still kind of miss, and they don't see the influence that he has. And but as an observer and friend of his, you actually see his impact on the sport and the way he manages himself and his humility, and so he's really the character for the sport here in Australia, I think, and I think he was a big influence back then as well.
Nigel, what happened to your professional career after 1993?
Well, I bounced around from job to job to job, worked for Reebok in the golf range there for a while and worked here and worked there. But eventually I went back to what I love, and I'm the sort of person that unless I see value in it and from a personal satisfaction point of view, or feel like it's a value to the community, I don't have an interest in it. And so I came back to to a business, and Andrew and I started up the Gaze brand, which we sold quite a few pairs of shoes, which went well for a number of years, and then it fell by the wayside. Now it's been reincarnated with Andrew and Dave Herbert, and these days it's going very well again. But I just got involved in basketball stuff and worked for the Tigers for a period, and now I love what I do. I really do. I'm nearly 60, and getting up and going and coaching kids and being involved in our business. I feel like a very, very lucky person, and my son works in it, and my kids are around it, and so the benefits to me from basketball have been incredible, and I never take it for granted.
Well, before we talk about Masters basketball and what you do when you're not involved with basketball, I'm keen to throw some lightning round questions past you. So how would you describe your skills as a player?
My skills suited the Melbourne Tigers system. So I was an okay defender. I was a good passer, I would say, without being humble. I was a moderate scorer, and I fit into their system. So I was just lucky to land in the right spot at the right time.
We all have a player that inspired us, either internationally or domestically. So who was your GOAT, greatest of all time?
For me, as far as a player, I used to love watching Phil Smyth play. I think he played the right way, and he's had silky skills, made the right decisions at the right time. I used to like watching Larry Sengstock play, and I think his game evolved over a long period of time because he was a centre, and then he ended up becoming more of a three, probably a four-man. So we had to develop an outside shot. So I appreciate and respect that. Leroy Loggins, maybe my favourite player of all time, along with Andrew, and I remember a game playing against Leroy Loggins at the old Albert Park Stadium, and we had a good lead. We didn't win that often in some of those seasons, and we had a good lead going into the fourth quarter, and I was guarding Leroy, and I could not stop him because he used to jump and lean back, and even if you had an outstretched hand, he'd get over that. And he scored 17 in the last in the last quarter to give the Bullets the victory. And I remember going into the change rooms, just sitting there with my head in my hands, but you have to admire what he's done and what he was able to do. And right now, I think Bryce Cotton for me is, along with Chris Goulding, there's not many players in the NBL where I'd go out of my way to watch or go to a game, but Bryce Cotton has unbelievable individual skills, and then also Chris Goulding's a superstar. But the one player I really like right now, sorry, I'm jumping around a bit because you asked a question without giving me much advance. I really like the way Josh Giddey plays, and I've always liked the way that Ben Simmons plays. Before Ben went through some injury issues in the NBA, the way he used to pass the ball and the way he ran down the floor and his movement and ability was fantastic. But for me now, Josh Giddey, with his basketball intelligence, I think there's a lot of cleverness about it. And I come from an era where, the Tigers and other teams, there was more of a half-court structure. So there'd be a 3 or 4 pass motion, and then someone would get an open layup. And I remember thinking, that was clever. Now these days it's more about Bryce Cotton breaking down a guy one-on-one and shooting a 3 or getting to the rim or whatever it may be. But I always like clever basketball, and I think Josh Giddey, for me, even though he's in the NBA system, is one of the most clever players going around.
In some of the circles that I mix in, we often celebrate, high basketball IQ. It's that ability to see things that are going to happen well before they do.
Yes, exactly.
Toughest competitor that you ever faced off against?
I remember one year we had some Americans playing for us, and they left halfway through the year. So we became this sort of skeleton team. And I'll never forget one day I had to play against James Crawford from a physical point of view. And this guy is like just chiselled out of stone. I'd say he was 6'8", could jump out of the gym, and it was I just couldn't stop him. And it was a bit like the Leroy Loggins thing we just talked about, where they're that good. No matter how hard you try, you just can't stop them. And so probably those two guys, I think, one from a physical point of view with James Crawford, and more from a skill and point of view with Leroy.
Coach that got the most out of you?
Well, Lindsay Gaze gave me the most opportunity, and I still think it's relevant today, is that everyone's trying to find their own opportunity, and kids coming through the ranks are trying to find a coach or a situation that's good for them. And it was very much a sliding doors moment, and Andrew and I became pretty good friends and still are. But Lindsay gave me the most opportunity, and I've always been grateful for that. And so he's without any doubt Lindsay Gaze.
What makes a great team?
I think a great team. I'm a little bit different to a lot of people. A lot of people you interview might talk about the wins and losses, but for me, a great team is when your mates are together, when you have, you're with your buddies, and you might have some ups and downs from a scoreboard point of view, but for me, it's really about a group of your friends.
And your favourite basketball story from those professional days?
Favourite basketball story? There's a lot. I'm trying to filter through some of the ones that can go on camera and some of the ones that can't. I'll tell you a funny story that is not from my playing days, but it's Alan Westover's a guy that I think he's gone from being an American to the most Australian bloke I can think of all the expat Americans, and he's just a no rubbish sort of bloke. And I was involved with the Melbourne Tigers team, the senior team, maybe 10 years ago, and I had to recruit some players and deal with some of the issues that go along with in Siebel. And we recruited this guy called Rob Jones. Now Rob Jones was a star with the St Mary's Gales, and so he was a great player, with the likes of, I think, the Paddy Mills era around there. Now he's coaching, assistant coach at University of Hawaii in Oahu. And we brought this guy out, and I didn't know who he was. My network said he was a great player, and he arrived here. And anyway, so there was one time I was telling I was telling Al Westover about this, and he says to me, "Don't let him hand out the drinks." This is about Rob. "Don't let him hand out the drinks." And I'm like, what does he mean by that? And it was kind of a bit mysterious. But I've later found out that Rob Jones is a direct descendant from the Jonestown murders, the massacre, I should say. And I always laugh about that when I think about Alan Westover telling those stories. And it's not just Al, but Brian Goorjian and Bruce Palmer are some of the great storytellers of Australian basketball. I'm sure they're on your list of people to interview in due course.
Hopefully I'm on their list.
Yes, exactly.
Tell us about your transition to Masters basketball.
Well, I'm still sort of teetering around the edges of it. Part of my business and part of what I like about my business at Chase is that we're always trying to develop new programs, and so we do some things with people who are trying to develop their skills at whatever age, and use basketball for fitness as well. So for me, playing, I haven't played for a while now, and my thing is, my wife and I, we do hikes. We did 2 on Mont Blanc last August, and we do hikes on an annual basis, and I play a bit of golf, and I ride my e-bike, which a lot of people say is not really exercise, and they could be right. But as far as playing, I don't do a great deal of playing. I'm kind of like that person who's trying to get in the skipping rope, trying to jump into the skipping rope, trying to find my right moment to get back into the game. And I'm sure I'll talk to you, George, about getting more involved in seniors basketball or masters basketball.
Well, we have a uniform, a jersey in your size.
Okay, great. At Triple XL.
We're spoiled for choice in Victoria because we have about 7 regional tournaments now. These are 2-day tournaments. We've just come out of Torquay, which is called the Surf Coast Masters. 59 teams, which is a very considerable sort of turnout. We also have over 50s weekly comp that started at Nunawading, but we're talking to a number of other stadiums about doing the same. And of course, a lot of our guys are getting together and fielding teams for international tournaments as well. And indeed, I tried to recruit you for our over 55 Switzerland team this year, but that wasn't something you're up for. Is it the physical condition, or you just got too much work going on?
Well, I went to Geneva in August last year, and if we have a budget for travelling, I'd probably mostly travel with my wife, actually. I mean, she could come to the games as well.
She certainly could.
Yes, and she could, but our focus is on hiking right now, and but you never know. Please keep on trying to recruit me, George. I'm sure there's an opportunity ahead.
Tell us more about life. What are you doing when you're not playing basketball? Supporting basketball through Chase.
Well, I've been the best thing to happen for me in basketball is I met my wife, Simone, through basketball. We've got 3 fantastic kids, and I think basketball's played a role in their life, in how they've turned out. So our focus is on being around our kids. We're waiting for grandkids. My daughters, Lucy and Grace, have got 2 fantastic young fellas at the moment, and Jack's still trying to find his life partner, I guess you'd say. So we focus on our kids. We've got a great family. We go away and do things. We just enjoy life, and I never ever take for granted how lucky I am to be involved in the great sport of basketball in Victoria, Australia, because it's as good as it gets here.
How long do you plan to keep working?
Well, the word work has never... I don't feel like I've worked.
Especially when you go to work in a tracksuit every day.
Exactly. So I don't feel like, I don't feel like I work. I feel like this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my days. How that may morph into maybe less hours or whatever. But I don't see myself. I don't see it as work. I see it as myself being very fortunate, and it's my work, if you call it that, and my social group and my family has kind of all morphed into one. So I don't see it as work, and I'm just going to keep on bouncing that ball for as long as I can.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to say thanks on behalf of our viewers of this channel. We really appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you. You've made an amazing contribution to basketball over a long time. Melbourne Tigers and certainly Brisbane Bullets, but the contribution that you're making to youth development and skills development and all of those values that we get an opportunity to tutor and build in at an early time, that's, I think, by far your life's biggest achievement. So thank you for all of the great work that you're doing.
And thanks for what you're doing too, George. I was rapt that you rang me up and asked me to be here, so I appreciate the opportunity and thanks very much.
My pleasure. All the best.